Campus to Canton. Campus to Canton on the Better Sports Network.
Welcome to the Tailgate by Campus to Canton, the only thing that gets me out of bed before 10 a.m. on a Saturday. We're powered by the Better Sports Network. I'm your host today, Colin at C2C Decker on Twitter, and I'm joined as always by Nicholas Ian Allen at CFB Winning Edge, Chris Moxley at Chris Moxley 19, and JJ Parker at JJ 1738. We had some decent matchups yesterday, actually, for a Friday. We had some low-scoring affairs. Louisville, NC State opened at 56.5. Louisville ends up pulling this one out 13-10. BYU versus Cincinnati. Keaton Slovis back from the dead as BYU's passing offense came alive in this one. But we'll start with the ranked v. ranked matchup, the beatdown in Corvallis. Oregon State, number 18, takes out undefeated and 10th ranked Utah. Utah still without Cam Rising, also missing running back Jaquindon Jackson in this one. Utah gets Cal next week, and then they play USC, Oregon, and Washington in 3 of their next 4. Nick, does Utah have any hope of keeping up with these high-powered offenses, even with Cam Rising coming back?
I think with Rising, if he gets back, if Keithy gets back, and it seems like they've been close for weeks, then I think we'll see a Utah team that is going to be competitive, going to have an opportunity to win each week. Now, will they be able to navigate specifically, at USC and then home against Oregon? That's definitely a tough ask, but we've seen Utah play pretty elite defense coming into last night's game. They were top 5 in my defensive team performance numbers. They were a little shaky at times last night, but overall still, a very, very tough defense. If that offense can, inch closer toward even average, then I think that this Utah team is still very, very dangerous, even to those top teams in the Pac-12.
Chris, you highlighted some stats here in our show sheet here with how bad Utah's offense has been. 3.2 yards per play, 2nd percentile, 5th percentile in EPA per play. What are your hopes for this offense with Cam Rising coming back?
I'm pretty worried. I think mobility is going to be a huge issue. We're only 9 months removed from an ACL tear. He tore his ACL in the Rose Bowl. Do I have that right?
I think it was right before. I think it was
the last game of the season. Either way, he tore it at the very end of the season. Getting him back week 1. Yeah, okay, Rose Bowl. Thank you, producer Will. I just don't think he's going to be that mobile, and that's a huge part of what Rising's game is. That's what separates him as a passer. But the offense is so bad right now that it can only get better. They scored a late touchdown in this. Game was already out of hand. It was 21-0 when we hit the big play. And that was a second-string quarterback who was the original second-string quarterback, but I guess he was the second string in this game because now the freshman is starting over him. The quarterback room's a mess. But I'm really, really down on this Utah team, even when Rising comes back. And I do think he will come back after the bye because next week is their bye week. Get him back as healthy as he's going to be. One loss in conference isn't going to totally kill him, but because it's a gauntlet anyway. But they got to play perfect football throughout the rest of the season in the Pac-12.
We got some usual Pac-12 shenanigans in this one as they just keep beating each other up. Last week, Washington State took out Oregon State. Oregon State comes in this week, takes out the undefeated Utah. Oregon State is clearly a top 25 team under Jonathan Smith. Chris, what's the future of this football program, and can they sustain this level of success?
I don't know, because they're currently not invited to a Power 5 conference, a true Power 5 conference, let's say. They're currently the Pac-2 with Washington State. I'd like to see them get invited. I think Corvallis is a pretty tough place to play, which probably went into the game as well last night. I think Jonathan Smith is an awesome coach. If they do end up merging with the Mountain West, which I think is certainly on the table, I could see Jonathan Smith taking a better job. Just one with more that offers more money, more lucrative with a bigger TV deal. Conference is getting a higher or teams are getting a higher payout. I think he's bound for that if he wants it. But yeah, I just don't know. I think they deserve. I think both them and Washington State deserve to be invited. I think they're both competitive teams. I think they both have pretty good coaches. I think they both have resources. They just don't have the TV draw. Like who's watching outside of us? Oregon State football, Washington State football. They're just not a national brand. So I understand why they don't hold a lot of value in terms of restructuring these TV deals. But I wish they did, because they're good teams, they're fun teams, they're good places to play with really loyal fan bases.
They are. We've seen the Washington State flag on game day how many years in a row now? They have that consecutive streak going, which is that's pretty cool. JJ, I'll throw this over to you. What do you think their future is? Do they end up ultimately joining that Mountain West Conference, or does somebody in the Power 5, maybe Power 4 now, open it up and invite Oregon State in?
I think they will, just because whenever you think about like a group of 5 teams, I don't know. I just don't see Oregon State being in there. And Washington State is a little bit different in that sense, because I feel like Washington State is a little bit lesser known. I think Oregon's got like kind of like I know Oregon has an actual tie with Nike. I'm pretty sure Oregon State also has like a pretty good deal with Nike. So I feel like that could have some pull too. So I don't really see them joining the Mountain West, but I'm sure someone will hand them out an offer. Like the Big 12 needs, I think they'll start handing out offers because they need people to join the Big 12.
All right. Oregon State hopefully joining a Power 4 conference here. Nick, what are your numbers have for Oregon State? Because over the past 2 years, they truly have been a giant killer out west.
So Oregon State is right on the cusp of the top 25 in my power rankings, which is significant. I mean, they're of course going to come in higher in the national polls, but a big chunk of the weight for what I put into power ratings and projections are talent numbers, roster numbers. It's about half of the equation, and Oregon State's just not, doesn't recruit at a top 25 level. A lot of the, like, if you just look at raw recruiting ratings throughout the roster by position, there's only one position where they're in the top 35, and that's quarterback, and that's with a transfer, former 5-star DJ Uyunglele, making up a good chunk of that average. So, but that being said, Jonathan Smith has done an incredible job. They consistently put up team performance numbers that are, outpace those roster strength numbers. And they're a very, very difficult team to play week in and week out, especially in Corvallis, as we saw last night, as we've seen for years. So even though my numbers are a little lower on Oregon State than maybe the pollsters or a lot of folks are nationally, they still, they have a schedule that is manageable. I mean, they are favored in looks like 4 of the next 5 games, according to my numbers. They're less than a 1-point underdog against UCLA. I wouldn't be shocked if by the time that game kicks off, Oregon State's actually a slight favorite. And then they've got 2, mega matchups at the end of the season with Washington and Oregon, where they're going to be a very, very tough team to beat. They're going to be an underdog in both games, but you can't count Oregon State out, I don't think.
Agreed. We'll be interested to follow them the rest of the year. But switching gears, we'll go back to that Louisville-NC State game. NC State brings in a new offensive coordinator this year, and Robert Anae, who has had success previously at Virginia and at Syracuse. He brought in his quarterback from Virginia, Brennan Armstrong, but that offense just has not really clicked. Chris, is it MJ Morris time in Raleigh? Do we need to see a quarterback change here?
If I'm the head coach, I'm going MJ Morris. MJ Morris is really solid last year as a true freshman. I mean, yes, he was up and down. Yes, Cam Rising is a senior citizen, so obviously he has more experience. But Cam Rising, Brennan Armstrong. Cam Rising's also pretty old.
Also,
neither here nor there. But I mean, I think you gotta start looking to what you have in MJ Morris. Just basically where you're at currently. You need to start either trying to win competitive games or look to the future. Like, you have to do one of these things, and I think MJ Morris is the answer for both of them. Armstrong just has not been there as a passer, and I don't blame him 100%. He's making some pretty bad throws. Don't get me wrong, but they don't have the receivers to compete. The offensive line is much worse this year than it has been in previous years. I don't know. The right side of that line which is where he usually runs, is pretty weak. So I don't know. I would put in MJ Morris if it was me, but I understand that Armstrong has that tie to Anai back when they were both at Virginia. So I think there's some hesitancy to move on, since this is only game 4 of their season. But I mean, I would put in MJ Morris. I think he's the future of the program. So
I would agree with that one as well. And like you said, with the receivers, Kevin Concepcion, true freshman, has really been the leading receiver for them. He's been kind of a breakout star.
That's bad. If your leading receiver is a true freshman who I think is fine, but not like uber talented.
Yeah. But yeah, it was they don't have the horses there. JJ, can MJ Morris get this team back on track, or do you think that's probably a more of a future and assessing what you have there? Is it a lost season for NC State?
I think it's a lost season. I kind of agree with Chris. I think you got to go with, there's like 2 ways you can go. You can play like competitive football, but this team is not good enough to really be competitive. So I would just look to the future and start freshmen like Kevin Concepcion starting. That's good. It's a good move for freshmen to get some playing time. And I think that QB experience is like a big thing in college football. And I think that they should look to start younger dudes.
All right. Well, speaking of quarterbacks, we'll go into our quarterback rankings here. We have some big names at big time programs at the top of our rankings this week. Number 1 for us this week, no surprise, is Caleb Williams, quarterback at USC, going up against Colorado and prime time at noon today. Then we have Michael Penix going up against Arizona, Joe Milton going up against South Carolina, Quinn Ewers versus Kansas today, Jaden Daniels versus Ole Miss in what should be a very exciting game in the later window, Bo Nix versus Stanford. And then we move out of the big names. We got Davis Brin, quarterback at Georgia Southern against Coastal. We have Brett Gabbert, quarterback Miami of Ohio versus Kent State. Brady Cook, quarterback Missouri versus Vanderbilt today. Reports are that he will play, as will Luther Burden as of this morning. Dylan Gabriel, quarterback Oklahoma versus Iowa State. Braden Fowler Nicolosi, quarterback at Colorado State, burst onto the scene 2 weeks ago in that overtime thriller versus Colorado. He gets Utah Tech this week. We got JT Daniels, the quarterback at Rice versus East Carolina. He is also expected to play today after leaving in the 3rd quarter last week with a lower body injury. Then we got Byron Brown, quarterback at USF versus Navy. And the final quarterback we have is the other side of that Ole Miss LSU battle in Jackson Dart. Nick, I'm going to come over to you here first on this one. What stands out to you? Is there anyone too high, too low? Anybody missing? What do your numbers say?
My numbers this week are pretty close to in line with a lot of these. A couple of names are a little higher on one than the other. I've said it probably every week. You will not find a bigger Joe Milton fan than me, but I'm a little lower on Joe Milton this week than those rankings. A couple of names that popped up higher perhaps than expected in mine this week. Jordan McLeod I have as a 8th in the QB rankings this week. Also pretty high on Chandler Rogers at North Texas. Seems like he has finally emerged and wrestled that QB1 job away from Stone Earl. And they're playing Abilene Christian this week, an FCS opponent, so decent matchup there. And then Preston Stone is higher than expected for me this week against Charlotte. So a couple of names that I didn't necessarily expect. Stone is top 5 in the rankings this week for me, which a little bit of surprise there, but we'll see.
Preston Stone had that 50-point explosion a couple of weeks ago. Maybe we get another one of those.
I like that Charlotte defense, for what it's worth.
Yeah, they slow things down. They want to run the ball, play keep away a little bit. So there's probably some of that that's not quite factored completely into my numbers. But as far as I was just
gonna say, I mostly just think it's interesting how different the identity of that program is.
For sure.
Moving forward under Biff Poggi.
Chris, what stands out to you here on this one, other than Joe Milton versus your South Carolina Gamecocks maybe being a little too high?
I actually kind of understand Milton this week. I thought we were going to get a defense from Nick. And this is the week that I'm going to defend Joe Milton now. They get Cooper Mays back this week. And I think week 1, we talked about how big of an impact he is on that offensive line. Like when you have a center who's been there for a long time, who has a lot of experience, and you have a guy who is not who had not taken a snap at center prior heading into the season, I think that you can feel more comfortable. And I think it's going to change the dynamic of the Tennessee offensive line a lot this week. And I think that's going to give Joe Milton more confidence. I think it's going to give him better ability to stay in the pocket maybe a little bit longer, feel more confident making throws, maybe increase his rushing ability, not take sacks. So I think that's actually going to be a big turnaround. So I'm fine being aggressive with Joe Milton this week. I also don't like the South Carolina. I don't think the defense is all that good. They got torched by Mississippi State last week, and Mississippi State is not a good team. In my opinion, that was a really bad game. So I'm actually a pro. I have been very skeptical of Joe Milton. This is my Joe Milton fan week.
Joe Milton also gets Ramal Keaton back this week, supposedly, and Jalen Wright, running back, is also supposed to be back this week. If you're tuning in, jump in the chat. Let us know what stood out to you, who's missing. Hit us with any start-sit questions you got, too. We can definitely address those later in the show as well. JJ,
can I give one more quarterback that isn't there that I think you can start this week? I really like DJ Irons out of Akron. They get Buffalo. I think Buffalo is like possibly the worst defense in the country. So,
all right. Well, let me hit you with this. Those wide receivers for Akron were guys that we drafted pretty highly in CFF this year. Alex Adams exploded to finish the year. Daniel George. Neither of those guys have been good up to this point. Would you trust them leading into today's matchup?
I think if you have them on your team and you're looking for a spot start, they're certainly in play. I mean, Buffalo, they did end up covering against Louisiana, but they got that defense didn't look any good. They gave it was Deion Chris's second start, and he torched them. And then the previous week, Kaden Salter torched them too. So I think anybody can do it. And I think the receiving weapons are going to certainly benefit. So yeah, I mean, I think they're absolutely in play.
All right. Yeah, you were pretty high on Deion Chris last week.
That's my boy.
JJ, what stands out to you on this list? Anybody too high, too low? Anybody missing?
I'm interested in seeing Max Johnson for A&M this week because Wigman's out. Arkansas is not a very good team, but I do think they have a chance. The spread is 6.5, but I think it's going to be a big impact for Evan Stewart and also just where this Texas A&M team's going forward this year. Because I think A&M has a good team. They did lose to Miami, but I think they've got a good team with a lot of talent. So I want to see how Max Johnson does.
All right, that's a good call. They're going to be the quarterback change there with Wegman out for the year. All right, we'll move into the running back position. And familiar name at the top, Campus2Canton favorite, Ashton Jeanty, running back at Boise State. He's going to be going up against Memphis this week. Next up, we have Jonathan Brooks, running back Texas versus Kansas. Marshawn Lloyd, running back USC versus Colorado. Nate Noel, running back Appalachian State, going up against UL Monroe. Jawar Jordan, running back Louisville, who played last night against NC State in that low-scoring affair. RJ Harvey, running back UCF, going up against Baylor. Jamal Haynes, running back, wide receiver, kind of hybrid at Georgia Tech, up against Bowling Green this week. Jaden Thomas, true freshman who exploded for UNLV last week, going up against a soft Hawaii defense this week. Darius Taylor does check in at number 9. He is another freshman phenom. We do have word that he is expected to be out today versus Louisiana, so adjust accordingly there. Rasheen Ali, running back Marshall versus Old Dominion. Blake Corum, running back Michigan versus Nebraska. Penny Boone, running back Toledo versus Northern Illinois, Toledo will likely be without quarterback Daquan Finn in this one. Ishmael Mahdi, running back Texas State, who exploded for over 250 yards last week, gets Southern Miss this week. And then we have LaDamian Webb, running back South Alabama, rounding out the top 14 against James Madison. Nick, what do your projections say this week? Anybody that we're too high or too low on here? Anybody missing?
Well, it's first of all good to see Jaden Thomas is high on this list. I didn't necessarily expect that, but he's up to number 2 for me this week, which was a bit of a surprise. And the way I do my projections is definitely different. It takes into account play calling history over the last 3 years, and I know that our C2C rankings are more week to week have a lot more weight on the most recent performance. So some of what goes into mine is the history of Brennan Marion there, and it's been very good for running backs in the past. And Jaden Thomas is playing, of course, very, very well right now. One name that jumped up high, number I think 5 on my list this week, that wasn't listed is Stajan Edwards from Georgia. He's finally healthy and playing, and pretty much the only or one of few fully healthy running backs for Georgia. They're banged up in a lot of positions, but that matchup on the road against Auburn is not the easiest, and actually the rushing yards, the numbers aren't super high in my projections, but Edwards, elsewhere, I think can compensate for that, and is in line for a pretty good, an opportunity for a good week this week. And then my numbers just have been in love with Blake Watson, the Memphis running back, one of maybe the best. Maybe Ashton Genty could. We'll get a real treat with the two of them. But between the two of them are two of the best receiving running backs that we'll see. And Blake Watson's been, is he their leading receiver? I'm not sure. He's had double-digit catches in games. Right. So that's a particular player, Blake Watson, that my numbers have just been in love with week in and week out. And a lot of it has to do with the potential for production as a receiver.
All right, Chris, anything stand out to you here on this list?
Not really. I actually largely agree with who we have at the top. George Holani is out, right? Is that confirmed for Boise State?
I haven't seen that confirmed yet. Nick, have you seen anything?
I haven't seen anything official yet this morning.
But he has yet to go this
the
season.
Expectation.
So, yeah,
he's been out the last 2 games, something like that.
I think so. Okay. So yeah, if George Holani plays, maybe I'm dialing back my G&T expectation, but he's awesome, man. He's so good just in both phases of the game, such a difference maker at the running back position. I think he's the next Boise State NFL back who they have had a very strong pipeline for probably almost 2 decades now. I'm really, really excited for him. So if you, like Nick said earlier, both backs in that game are going to be exciting. That's going to be a really good group of 5 game. If you're sitting around looking for something to turn on for excitement, I think that's the game. And I think Blake Watson should be a top 12-ish back as well. All
right. I like the G5 love there on that one. JJ, what stands out to you here on this running back list?
I like our last player, LaDamian Webb. He plays James Madison. They've got a pretty good defense, but in the past 3 games, I think he has 2 touchdowns in each of those. And he gets goal line work, obviously, and I think if they score, I think he's going to score today. And I also like Blake Corum for Michigan. I think that Nebraska's not that good, and I think that Michigan's O-line should do pretty well against them as well.
Yeah, we should see Nebraska get beat up pretty good, I think, on that one. We'll move into the wide receivers here next. We got a big name at the top here with a resurgent Malik Neighbors, wide receiver for LSU, having a breakout year, going up against Ole Miss. We have Brendan Rice, wide receiver for USC, coming off that 133-yard, 2-touchdown performance last week. Roma Dunze, wide receiver for Washington, up against Arizona. Troy Franklin, wide receiver, Oregon versus Stanford this week. Torrey Horton, wide receiver, Colorado State versus Utah Tech. Jalen McMillan, wide receiver for Washington, going up against Arizona. He did sit out last week. This is definitely a player to monitor today. And then we have our third wide receiver from that potent Washington pass attack, Jalen Polk, also going up against Arizona. Caleb Hood, wide receiver, Georgia Southern versus Coastal. Cullen Lacey, wide receiver, South Alabama versus James Madison. Brian Thomas Jr., the second wide receiver for LSU on this list, versus Ole Miss. Xavier Weaver versus wide receiver for Colorado in that USC matchup today. He is reportedly likely to play today. We got Ricky White, wide receiver at UNLV versus Hawaii. Nick Anderson, wide receiver, Oklahoma versus Iowa State. And we round out the top 14 with Luther Burden, wide receiver, Missouri, going up against Vanderbilt. And as mentioned earlier, he is expected to play today at this point. Nick, anything stand out here to you?
Well, the first name that jumps out to me, and I love Brendan Rice, but that USC receiving core, you never know who is going to be the most productive out of that group. And it's difficult for me to put that much trust in Rice. He's third on the team in targets behind Mario Williams and Zachariah Branch. You could argue that Taj Washington has been the most productive because he's had, a couple of long touchdowns this year. Dorian Singer, most of us expected to be the top wide receiver for that group coming into the season. I think there's still a chance that, he might not emerge as, the every week wide receiver one, but he's still in the mix to be, potentially step up and have his big week at any point. So as much as I like Rice and as good as he has been in the last couple of weeks, and certainly has a knack for getting in the end zone, which is of course huge, but man, it's just, there's so many options there for USC that it's really, really difficult for me to trust that he's going to be, one of the very top options.
What about that revenge game narrative, as Tristan Cook points out in the chat, going up against his former team, Colorado? How did the revenge game play in here, Nick?
I don't know. I guess it.
They don't impact your numbers.
That I have not added that to my projections.
You have a revenge game.
But hey, it's we've got a long off season coming up. I can figure that out. Maybe add that to the mix. But one that I am a little more confident in, actually, my number one projected receiver this week is Torrey Horton, Utah Tech. Colorado State is going to be without one of its top running backs. Its other top running back is potentially going to be limited. I think that they're really going to want to put up a big number, show a lot of improvement offensively this week. And I feel like it's a really good spot for Torrey Horton, who's good every week, of course, but against Utah Tech has an opportunity maybe for a big day in potentially just 3 quarters. But my numbers are very, very high on Horton this week.
All right. Chris, anything stand out to you here out of this group?
I think the number one wide receiver on the season, Greg Larvadain, is. I don't think he's playing this week, which is why I don't think you see him in the top 14.
Right.
I don't think we have official confirmation on that, but that would be my expectation. So I would plan on, if you're just rolling him out, no questions asked, to pay as much attention as you can to the Miami of Ohio game, close to kickoff, see if he's dressed, see if he's going through warm-ups. What time is that game at? I think it's a noon kickoff.
I believe it is. They go up against Kent State in this one. It's very soft defense there as well.
So I haven't seen anything yet, and when it comes through here, we'll definitely get it out to you. But if he does play, I would like to like to roll him out for sure. And then the injuries, we just have no news because that's how college football operates. I don't know what receivers are going to play for Ole Miss this week, but if we get, Zachary Franklin or Trey Harris, I'd like to start one of them. LSU secondary has been pretty rough so far this year. I don't think they have. I think the talent on the Ole Miss wide receiver core is superior to anybody they have on the back end. So depending on who we get in that game, I'd like to roll them out. But again, I don't know because we have no news on injuries.
Injury reporting in college football needs to change. If the NCAA is listening out there, do us a favor. Help us out.
Especially if you want betting to become a bigger part of your sport.
JJ, what do we got? What stands out to you out of this list?
I'm a big Malik Neighbors fan, so it's great to see him.
There we go. I knew you were going to love seeing him at the top.
I saw it and I couldn't help but smile. But yeah, I think he's having a great year, and I'm pretty sure I put him number 2 at our preseason All-American team. And honestly, right. I would have put him at 1, but I think it's like blasphemy to do that to Marv. But I like him as a prospect, and I think he's going to have a good day too against Ole Miss.
All right, and we'll move into the tight end rankings here. We have a familiar name at the top here as well, Dallin Holker, Colorado State tight end up against Utah Tech in a game that Nick expects them to, and a lot of us expect them to really run up the score. Jatavian Sanders, tight end Texas, going up against Kansas. Brock Bowers, tight end Georgia versus Auburn. Luke Haas, tight end Arkansas, who was Campus2Canton's freshman of the week last week. Can he keep it going against Texas A&M? Michael Harrison, tight end for Colorado, up against USC. There have been a lot of Colorado and USC players in this list. We get Isaac Rex, tight end for BYU, who played at Cincinnati last night in that high-scoring game. Tyler Warren, tight end Penn State versus Northwestern. RJ Maryland, tight end SMU versus Charlotte. Jared Wiley, tight end TCU, going up against West Virginia today. Holden Stays, tight end for Notre Dame, playing Duke in that hotly contested game later on today. Jake Brenningstool, tight end Clemson versus Syracuse. JJ McAfee, tight end Georgia Southern versus Coastal. Gino Campiotti, the former QB turned tight end for UMass, playing Arkansas State this week. And then we have another favorite of Chris Moxley, Max Clare, tight end for Purdue, going up against Illinois. We'll just breeze through this here quick. I'll open this up to Nick first. Anything stand out here to you?
Well, is anybody concerned about Garrett Miller and his impact on Max Clare? I know he had sort of an ugly hand-finger injury last week, but when he was back on the field for the first time in a while. I know he's got a little bit of NFL draft buzz, potentially some Senior Bowl buzz. I haven't seen an update, but if he were back, does that impact Max Clare for you guys? Because it seemed like, wasn't he targeted 2 or 3 times on that opening drive last week?
Yeah, he was the veteran in the room prior to the season. I think they expected him to be the tight end 1 before Clare emerged. As someone with a lot of Garrett Miller and 0 Max Clare. But I actually think Clare's kind of made a name for himself to the point where the offense might flow through the tight end position, and you might get like 5-6 targets each, which is, that's enough to get in the top 14. At least that's my take on it. But I think both tight ends are good. Not that I would start both, but I think Clare has proven that he can operate better downfield. I think Miller's targets were mostly within like 10 yards, if I remember correct, but I watch a lot of games, so I don't remember exact tight end usage for Purdue.
A couple of names that I'm a little higher on. I think top 10 for me this week, Tanner Koziol, Ball State. I know he's been off to a slow start. Ball State has been terrible, but Western Michigan, not a bad matchup. And I don't think we're who's the other guy there that hasn't played all year? Brady Hunt. I haven't heard yet if he's going to be back, but feel like there's a chance that Koziol should again be a big part of that offense. And then Benjamin Urasek, we haven't heard much from since that huge week 1 performance against Hawaii, but I think he's still capable of that. And I would expect if Stanford's going to keep it at all close with Oregon early, Eurosec's probably going to have to be pretty involved.
All right. JJ, anything stand out to you out of this group?
JT and Brock Bowers, I think those are the only tight ends that should be mentioned because they're really the only tight ends that have any value to me, at least in the NFL. Or maybe there's some other dudes, but JT and Brock are the big names. I think JT had like 100 yards or something against Baylor last week. I was watching it, and I'm not a Baylor fan, so I couldn't help but smile. But I think Brock has a lot of value. I've been hearing like top 12 draft capital, which I think is insane. But the NFL does what the NFL does. But I couldn't just like, how did Kyle Pitts do being drafted? What, 4? I'm pretty sure he was drafted before Jamar Chase, which I just think is insane in general. But
yeah, I'm a Falcons fan, so that one hurts.
Yeah,
that one hurts.
I mean, I like Kyle Pitts, but like, how could you draft him over Jamar Chase? It doesn't make sense. So I think that these two tight ends, they both are going to get some draft capital, and I think like this year is a big performance indicator for them.
All right, love to hear it. Chris Moxley, tight end guru, hit us with something here quick. Anything stand out to you?
Yeah, I think you can feel really confident in Lukash the rest of the season. I mean,
right.
he's emerged as basically like the primary receiving option for KD Jefferson down in Arkansas. Tough matchup this week. Texas A&M is a good defense, but I think you got to feel really good about him being a top 10 tight end the rest of the season, even as a true freshman, which is a huge accomplishment.
All right. And we had somebody in the chat here asking if Caden Prescorn will play today. He played last week. Any news on him?
He was limited last week. I do expect him to play more snaps this week. And Michael Trigg left the team. So yeah, you're not really competing for tight end targets as much. Again, I talked about the receivers earlier. Maybe Caden Prescorn is the one who benefits the most from this poor LSU defense.
All right. Well, we're going to go to break here next. On the other side, we're going to come with some start-sit decisions. So drop those in the chat. Let us know who you're having a hard time deciding to start or sit today. We'll be back right after the break.
It's college football game day, and we're getting you ready for all the action on Campus to Canton.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, and they let him be the quarterback for a long time, too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. I there's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl. And when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, yeah, well, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing, too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game that they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman, and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, look, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky,
no way,
is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yards go.
All right, we are back. We are brought to you by Better Sports Network. Check out the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. Start a free 7-day trial of Fantasy Alarm's All-Pro subscription today and get DFS content and NFL picks for week 4 and 5 for free. Go to fantasyalarm.com/win. They're going to help you with your lineup decisions for the NFL with their league sync and lineup generator. We're going to help you with your lineup decisions for your CFF squads today. We got some starts and sits here to help you win this week. Nick, I'm going to come over to you first here in this one. Who you got as a start this week? Who are you liking?
So maybe this is a me problem, but I just can't quite quit Josh McCray yet. And I know that's, maybe there's some sunk costs there for me, but Reggie Love, who has been the first on the field running back for Illinois, has been banged up. I mostly heard questionable, but it sounds like perhaps limited this week. Maybe there's a chance that he sits out. And McCray got a little bit more of an extended look last week. Got, I think, 17 carries, went for 85 yards. Big back, runs with power, should be an asset down by the goal line. And in a week where we're starting to, see some top guys sit out or bye weeks, I should say. And then some injury issues affecting some other players as well. I don't know. I found myself going through my lineups and I've got tons of Josh McCray shares that have been on the bench the last few weeks. And I had to move him into the starting lineup in a few places.
This is the week.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, if not now, when, I suppose. But seems like a decent spot. And another one that's a little bit more of an easy decision, even though UNLV is healthier at the running back position and does have quite a few options. As we talked about earlier, Jaden Thomas is very, very high in my projections, very high in the C2C rankings as well. So I'm starting him everywhere I've got an opportunity to this week.
All right. We do have a question in the chat here. Speaking of running backs, we got starting Devin Neal, Kansas running back, Kayron Adams, Massachusetts running back, or Jordan Waters, running back at Duke. Anybody have any strong opinions here? I'm personally sitting Waters, but I don't have a strong feel for the other two.
Neal's been so good. I mean, I think just ride him until further notice.
I don't have an issue rolling out Neal, but I actually think I'd prefer Kayron Adams. They get Arkansas State, and I think Arkansas State's like the worst team, possibly the worst team in the country. And Kayron Adams has been really good, actually, for UMass. So I think I also really like Devin Neal. Devin Neal is going to be a focal point of this offense because they need to beat Texas this week. And they played Texas competitively every single year. 2 years ago, they beat them when they were like 20-point dogs. So I expect Neal to get a lot of touches, but I think Neal for upside. You want to go safety, go Kayron Adams. That's how I would play it.
All right. I like it. And then Nick, who do you got? Who are you sitting this week? Who are you less confident in here?
So Jaquavius Marks has been banged up. Mississippi State running back has been productive this year. Is actually been a pretty good fantasy player on what's been an otherwise not great Mississippi State offense. But I think that if you've got a better option, definitely I would go for it. And then one that I struggled with a bit, and the way my teams are generally built, I have often a wealth of options at quarterback. So maybe this is an issue, or maybe this is something that not everybody else has, but a player who is in our top 15 quarterback rankings this week, I'm actually going to sit when possible, and that's Byron Brown for USF. Playing against a team like Navy always is just it can end up being a very, very tricky situation. Navy's got a pretty good defense just in general, but the way that they operate offensively, and the way I expect that they would attack a USF team that tries to play up tempo, is Navy's probably going to try to play keep away. And I just don't know that Brown is going to have the football enough to be as productive as I would need him to be this week. And so maybe not everybody has options, and has the luxury, I guess, of sitting Byron Brown. And I understand there's definitely a big talent edge there with USF, and it could be one of those weeks where Navy just can't keep up. But Navy is actually a favorite in this game, and I do expect that they will be very, very slow on offense, and that's probably going to impact Brown's opportunity, his ability to operate at a high level this week.
Byron Brown's been a favorite of mine all year, so I don't like hearing that. I'm going to choose to ignore that. Chris, we're going to go over to you here. Who do we got? Who are we starting here this week?
The entirety of the Georgia Southern offense. They get Coastal Carolina this week. I think Coastal is – I said it when they hired Tim Beck, that was a terrible hire. Because if you watch Tim Beck's offenses at North Carolina State, they were disgusting. They were not aggressive. They were dink and dunk. They were too rush heavy when they need to be throwing more. And the Coastal offense looks terrible. However, the defense looks even worse than sometimes. I mean, their defense has always been quite poor, but I think Georgia Southern's offense is like leagues above them. I really like what they're doing in Statesboro. So, I mean, I'm rolling out Davis Brin. I'm rolling out Derwin Burgess, rolling out Caleb Hood, rolling out, if I need a tight end, JJ McAfee. I mean, I feel really good about this passing offense this week. I just think they're going to, I took them to cover this game too. I think they're going to have a pretty easy time against this Coastal team.
All right. Does that include, you named all the passing options there. Does that include Jalen White out of the running backs?
I think so. The only pause I have is that OJ Arnold is pretty involved this year. And I don't love what I've been seeing in terms of that split. So yes, probably. I'm starting Jalen White in spots. So obviously I felt like I have to. But yeah, I for sure think you can.
All right.
I got one more start that I didn't put on the sheet though, and that is going to be. Let me make sure that I'm right about this. Clemson wide receiver, was it Troy Brown?
Tyler Brown.
Tyler Brown. I know it's T Brown. Because like you said, you were about to say Antonio Williams is out today. He did not travel with the team. I think Brown, who is a 3-star true freshman, right, is been really very impressive for this Clemson team. I also think that you can play his prize picks 4.5. Wink, wink. I think he's going to be pretty good this week. Syracuse, I mean, Clemson's just going to outclass Syracuse is the bottom line. I just don't think this game's going to be close. I know it's 7 right now, but it really should be 10 in my opinion. And I think Brown is becoming possibly the wide receiver 1 on this team. I think he's becoming a bigger piece of the offense than Bo Collins is. And I think that he's kind of sliding into a really important role. He seems to be a favorite target of Cade Klubnik. So, yeah, I think you can start Brown.
All right. Yeah, we have, with Antonio Williams being out, looking for somebody to step up. Tyler Brown is a great name there. Drop your start-sit questions in the chat there. Drop a like on the channel as well here. Drop a like on this video. Chris, we'll come back to you for sits. Who do you not like this week?
I don't really want to start Ontario Brown versus Toledo. Now, I hate Toledo. I don't hate Toledo. I actually like Toledo. I like the school, like the program, like the Glass Bowl, a lot of cool things. I don't like their head coach.
Capital of the world, baby.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Are you a big bird guy, right? Bird watcher?
I am.
You got to make the trip to Toledo, Ohio, then.
Yeah, I am a big bird guy. Jesus. I am sitting in Ontario Brown this week. I don't like Toledo's head coach, Jason Candle, but that's not going to prevent me from rolling out the NIU offense. I know NIU plays them tough. This is a low-key rivalry game that a lot of people I don't think realize. So I do think NIU is going to play tough, but I don't think I want to start anybody on NIU this week because I think it's going to be in the muck, low scoring, just grind it out type game. Like Ontario Brown might have 20 carries for like 70 yards. That's kind of the game I expect from him this week. So I don't really feel comfortable starting him, even though I do think that he's kind of secured his spot as like the lead back. Not super comfortable this week.
All right. We got somebody in the chat here asking Byron Brown, quarterback USF, or Jackson Dart, quarterback for Ole Miss. Nick, I think we know you're not choosing Byron Brown out of these two, right?
Yeah, I think I'll go with Dart. I mean, the LSU defense has certainly struggled at times, has been banged up. They do get Omar Spates back, one of their top linebackers this week. But I'm a little bit concerned about the impact of Navy as an opponent on Brown. So I probably would go Dart, but that's a pretty close call.
All right, JJ, you got a good feel for Dart versus Brown there? Who do you leaning towards?
I don't know. I like Brown because I do think the Navy opponent is definitely different in terms of how they play or how their style of offense. But I don't know. I don't think Navy's that good this year either. So I think that's a big part. And I think LSU should get after Jackson Dart. I think Perkins should have a good day if they keep him at edge, but we'll see.
Yeah, and like Nick said, with Spates coming back, that'll free up Perkins to be on the edge a little bit more. JJ, who do you got as your start of the week this week?
I've got two, and I got Ryan O'Keefe, who I talked about the first time I was on here. I said he was the best player I ever played against. He went to Round Rock as well. Him and Garrett Miller both went to Round Rock, and Colin Sullivan. That was a really good team we played. But he's an explosive player. He's also really shifty. They're playing Virginia. He plays for Boston College. They're playing Virginia, and he gets a good amount of targets. He got 7 in the past 2 weeks, and I think that he's just an explosive player. He's also a track guy. Texas relays, he ran I think it was a 10.5. I don't even know, but he was a fast
Very
guy.
explosive, yeah.
Yeah. And I also have Miles Price out there for Texas Tech. Pretty sure he's playing. He was limited last Saturday, which is weird because he just did special teams, which is weird when you're limited. But in the past games he's played, he's 3 for 3 on touchdowns. So hopefully he continues that streak.
Yeah, I was a big Ryan O'Keefe guy heading into the year here too. So I'm hoping that he can establish a connection with Castellanos now under center. But speaking of under center, you got a quarterback that you're sitting this week. Who are you sitting?
I think Will Rogers is not a good play. I mean, in deeper, he's on one of my C2C leagues in one of my 2 QB and 1 Superflex, and I'm just not starting him against this Bama defense. I think that it's finally starting to pick up, even though I think Dallas Turner is starting to play better, but I'm not sold on him yet. And I liked him last year, but this year I think he grew in size, but he's not the same person. But we'll see, because he's got some first round buzz too. He played really bad against LSU. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? And I think that this Bama team is better than LSU, and I think it'll be kind of the same look. And I also looked for that Prize Picks line. We had the under less than 1.5, negative 1.5 yards. I wish that was the line this week, but it's not. But
those are always the fun ones to play.
Yeah, just expect a low output from him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We got somebody in the chat asking Nick Singleton or Ryan O'Keefe today. JJ, you're a big O'Keefe guy. I'm big on Singleton this week. Who do you got?
It's close, because Singleton, they should be up early, and I think he could score multiple touchdowns. But I do think I'll talk about it later. But I think Kaytron Allen's going to out-touch him, just because the game script and how it goes. So O'Keefe could be a sneaky play, but the safe choice is Nick Singleton, though.
All right.
Is it Eric Singleton or Nick Singleton in the question?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Yeah. Okay.
Eric Singleton. Okay. All right.
Because I was like, yeah, it's Nick, but okay. I would go Eric Singleton if it's Eric Singleton, by the way. Which it is. Yeah, I think Georgia Tech is going to steamroll this Bowling Green team.
Yeah, I had Eric Singleton as a start of the week for me on our Campus Life podcast that comes out on Tuesdays. He has a touchdown in every game this year, as our guy Barnabas pointed out. I do like Eric Singleton this week. Nick, what are your thoughts here on Singleton versus O'Keefe?
Yeah, I might side with O'Keefe. I know that he's disappointed a little bit compared to what I expected coming into this season. And Eric Singleton has exceeded expectations. But I think that the high end upside and usually that's where I tend to go is what's the who's got the ability to take over a game. And I think that O'Keefe is a little bit more that's a little bit more in the cards for him. I mean, we've seen more so at UCF, but we've seen him, break off big runs in addition to, short reception that ends up taking a long way. I think that anytime he touches the ball, he's got the ability to score. And so I like that upside, I think, a little bit more than Singleton. All
right. And if it was Nick Singleton, what are your thoughts there on Nick Singleton?
Well, so good question. I in that case, I probably would side with Singleton, but that playing Northwestern and splitting carries already. It's got the potential, I think, to be just kind of a slog. And I just feel like it could, is he going to get in the end zone? And yeah, he definitely could. I mean, they do that T formation down on the 1 yard line and he gets a good chunk of those.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. That's tough.
Nick Singleton. So I have starting to sit here for you guys here for this week. There's a lot of quarterbacks on buys this week. A lot of guys that you were counting on: Jordan Travis, Drake May, Will Howard, Cam Ward, Tyler Van Dyke, Mitch Griffiths, Chevin Cordero, Curtis Rourke, Frank Harris, and Kyle McCord too, even though maybe you weren't necessarily counting on them quite as much because they've been hurt and disappointing. A lot of quarterbacks on buys this week. Somebody you can roll out there that I feel confident in is Mikey Keene, quarterback, Fresno State, going up against Nevada. Keene has 2 games this year with 325 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. He's thrown at least 30 pass attempts in every single game, has at least 2 passing touchdowns in every game. And that Nevada pass defense is atrocious. They allow the 3rd most pass yards in the country at 340.5 per game. They are the 3rd worst in the country in defensive pass EPA per play and the worst in defensive pass success rate. I'm starting Mikey Keene. I'm starting Eric Brooks. And as Felix says in the chat, start his guy, Elijah Gilliam, as well. We're starting the whole Fresno offense. But if you need somebody at quarterback, I like Mikey Keene a lot this week. I am sitting Ray Davis, running back for Kentucky, going up against Florida. Florida has the best run defense in the country in defensive rush success rate. They allow 82 rush yards per game, which is 15th in the country. They also limit opponents' scoring. They only allow 13.5 points per game in the country, which is 17th. Now, they did get a Utah team that was still trying to figure themselves out and is still trying to figure themselves out offensively. They got McNeese State and Charlotte in there as well. So they haven't played the strongest of competition except for Tennessee. They held Tennessee to 100 yards rushing. They're the 7th best rush team in the country in terms of yards per game, actually, with 229.5. That's a potent rushing attack, and they limited them. So I think Kentucky is going to be in for a rough day, and I think Ray Davis is going to be in for a rough day against Florida. Nick, do your numbers kind of agree with Florida being that good of a rush defense. Somebody we should avoid.
So I will say I know that my numbers are quite high on Kentucky against Florida this week. Though Florida, to your question, rush defense in defensive team performance against the run, they rank 20th. They are top 3 against FCS opponents with garbage time thrown out in success rate allowed, which is definitely a little bit of a concern if you're Kentucky and thinking about how they're going to be able to run the football effectively. This Florida defense is legitimately good. So that is a little bit of a concern, but they are much improved compared to the last few years. And I'm a little skeptical that they're going to be able to carry that through the entire season. So I'm conflicted, but yeah, the Florida defense so far, especially against the run, has been very tough.
Chris, any thoughts there on that Florida Kentucky matchup?
I do. I want to save it for later because I got some hot takes on it.
All right, we got some
quick
hot takes
question though
coming up later. Absolutely.
Are you starting anybody from Colorado today?
That's a tough one. I think I would trust Shedeur and Xavier Weaver in this one. Xavier Weaver was pretty high on our who is playing. He was pretty high on our rankings this week. They're just going to have to throw the ball against USC, and we saw they're not the strongest defensively. Colorado might be able to put up some points, so I think I can trust those two. Nick, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I have to start Weaver in a couple of spots, and I don't necessarily feel great about it. Usually, if I hear a whisper that a guy is questionable or something like that, I look to replace them, and sometimes I overthink it with that, but. Yeah, I think Weaver feel good enough about, and the USC defense is also somewhat improved, but doesn't necessarily scare me. I think Colorado will be able to move the football today. So if Weaver's anything close to 100%, then he's startable for sure.
All right, JJ, any quick thoughts there on USC or on Colorado's offense against USC?
I think Shedeur is going to get his get back, but we'll see. The USC defense is not particularly scary, so I think they should throw the ball a lot.
All right, and they might have to. We got one last start sit question here before we head into the break and bring some prize picks for you afterwards. We got Danny Hall asking Pafeli Ashlock, wide receiver for Hawaii against UNLV, or Will Shipley, running back for Clemson, going up against Syracuse. I think I would lean Ashlock in this one, but Nick, what are your thoughts here?
So my projections have been getting lower and lower on Will Shipley. They were really, really high early in the year, but have definitely ticked down. I will say, and you said full PPR.
Yes.
They're both projected for 17.5 points for me this week. So
coin flip.
It is a real coin flip. I think I trust Shipley a little bit more. From what I've seen from Ashlock and Hawaii offensively the last couple of weeks, I don't know. I'm not sure that he's a lock any longer. And I know Shipley is splitting time a little bit more than personally I expected. But right now, I think between the two, I would go Shipley. All
right, Chris, any last thoughts on that one?
I would go Ashlock. I just think Syracuse run defense is pretty good. Ranked 13th in 13th in EPA per play, and then 15th in success rate. I think they've been pretty good on the ground. And I don't really like Will Shipley all that much. I think they're trying to mix film off in a little bit more. I think this is a bounce back week for the Hawaii offense. I think the UNLV secondary is probably the weakest part of that team.
Yeah, that's why I lean Ashlock there as well. All right. We're going to head into the break here. Coming up on the other side, we will have some prize picks for you. We're going to make you a little bit of money.
Jake Ferguson, I think, is going to be one of the biggest frauds in fantasy, to be honest. I'm trading Jake Ferguson in Dynasty for anything right now. I'm trading him in redraft if somebody will take him. He scored the touchdown on a 1-yard play this week, but this guy, last week, he played 75% of the snaps, only ran 50% of the routes. This week, we were hoping that would change. He only ran 21 of 43. Not even half again. So we were hoping it would improve from 50, worse than 50. So Jake Ferguson, not the guy we want. And you saw it. I mean, if you watch the game, they weren't locked in on anybody. They had Hayden Hendershot out there, got a goal line carry. Luke Schoonmaker, the rookie, scored a touchdown. Like, they are not committed to just one tight end. And if you have CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup and Brandon Cooks and Tony Pollard, if the tight end isn't playing every single snap, then he's not relevant. I mean, even if the one guy was playing every snap, you're not going to get a Dalton Schultz because there was no Brandon Cooks last year, and Michael Gallup was coming off an ACL. So the conditions changed, and now this guy's playing a partial snap share. Sell Jake Ferguson now. And people tell me, oh, Dak Prescott loves throwing the tight end. That's not even true. There was a guy on Reddit that just posted a study. His name is, like, I call cats or something like that. Great study, though, that showed that Dak Prescott doesn't target the tight end on an above average level. I mean, CeeDee Lamb got 156 targets last year. 156. And Michael Gallup and Noah Brown combined for 150. So, and the running backs combined for 85. So what is it? Does he love the tight end, but he also loves CeeDee Lamb, and he also loves the other wide receivers, and he also loves the running backs? Or just Kellen Moore just throw the ball a ton? That's what it was, right? So it's like this whole he loves the tight end situation, that's not even true, right? Or he just loves everybody. Maybe he does love the tight end, but clearly he loves CeeDee Lamb. No, like clearly he loves the running backs. So just don't worry about it. Forget about it. Trade Jake Ferguson for whatever you can get right now.
We are back with some prize picks for you, ready to make you a little bit of money. Prize picks, promo code C2C for 100% deposit match. The lines have been pretty sharp this year, but I think we've been a little bit sharper. We've had some really nice plays on the tailgate, made you guys some money, ready to do it again. Nick, what are your favorite prize pick lines this week?
I have, as I've said before, this is sort of my first year really fully fleshing out player projections week by week. And I feel like I'm learning as we're going. I'm liking that. It seems like each of the last 3 weeks, my projections have gotten closer and closer to those prize pick lines, which is a good sign on the whole for the projections. Not as much maybe a good sign as finding value, but I feel like they're working pretty well on passing yards and receiving yards. So I've got Devin Leary this week under 224 passing yards against Florida. Mostly my projections trend a little under, and so I look for overs on the passing yardage, but the projected edge there this week I think is just too big to ignore. It's I've got Leary projected for 182.6, and that feels like some good value for me this week. 3 wide receiver receiving yards projections that I'm on this week. Again, more or one under that the projection is part of it, but also I know we've heard that Luther Burden is playing this week, but somewhat similar to some other conversations that we've had. When a guy is questionable coming into the week, limited in practice leading up to the week, I wonder, or more often I trend toward, okay, he might play, but is he going to be up to his full, potential there. And so the projection being under Luther Burden 87.5, plus throw in the injury layer to it, where he, perhaps could be limited, could play, a smaller percentage of snaps than we normally would see. That one seems like pretty good value to me. A couple of overs where see a pretty big projected edge. Evan Stewart, Texas A&M wide receiver today, over 66.5 receiving yards against Arkansas. I'm not at all worried about the change at quarterback there. Max Johnson, the way that my player ratings work is the same player on paper. He's kind of waiting. I know they have different skill sets, but Johnson actually, I think, leans a little bit more toward being productive through the air. That's a good sign for Stewart. And then Dominic Lovett, Georgia wide receiver today against Auburn, over 42.5 receiving yards. It sounded early in the week like we might see Ladd McConkey, but he has been dealing with a back issue all fall so far. That Georgia running back room has really been banged up, as we've discussed. And 42.5 is just a very, very achievable number. And Dominic Lovett is that top wide receiver, not necessarily the top target or receiving option there for Georgia, but has, I think, it is the most likely wide receiver to have an opportunity to get 50 yards or more. And I think 42.5 is very, very reasonable for him.
All right. JJ, you highlighted earlier about Max Johnson and your concerns. Are you concerned about Evan Stewart in this one? What are your thoughts on that over 66.5 line?
I'm not really. I think Evan Stewart's a good player, so 66 is pretty low. But I saw Felix said he has Arkansas money line plus 200. I actually like that play just because Max Johnson, he's a backup quarterback. Like realistically, anything could happen. So I think plus 200 it's got a good value.
Felix sharp better over there. Arkansas money line plus 200. Chris, what prize picks plays do you have going for us here today?
Yeah, last week we got funky. I like getting funky on these because I think there's a little bit of value in the less bet lines. So last week my favorite every time is this negative rush yards, right?
Yep.
Favorite of Matt Deutsch. And I think we got value on one again this week, which is Ben Bryant, the Northwestern quarterback, is negative 7.5. I think he could end up with like negative 25 or something. I mean, Penn State's pass rush is 6th in PFF. They got Chop Robinson, who's just dominating edges at edge. I don't think Northwestern has a shot in this game, and I don't think the offense is going to move the ball. Give me the Ben Bryant to have less than 7.5, negative 7.5. So negative 8, negative 9, negative 10, etc. Give me Trey Smack, who is the Florida kicker.
Great name.
Yeah, great. Not a kicker name.
No.
But great name regardless. Over 6.5 kicking points. He went 5 for 5 last week against Charlotte with a 54-yarder. This dude has a leg and is accurate. I expect this to be a pretty close game between Kentucky and Florida, and I think Billy Napier is the type to say, hey, I just want to take the points. So give me that opportunity. I like Florida in this game to be able to move the ball a little bit, but maybe not convert in the red zone. So that's the perfect opportunity for kicking points. So over 6.5 kicking points for Smack. And then guy we've been talking about a lot on this show so far, Tyler Brown, over 4.5 receptions for Clemson. He's the wide receiver one, I think, with Antonio Williams out. I think he was heavily targeted last week. I believe that number is still up. I'll put it on the sheet.
Go get that soon. Go get that.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of playing overs on him, and I think that the 4.5 receptions is 4.5 receptions or 11.5 fantasy score. I think both are really solid numbers honestly, the 53.5 receiving yards too. Just Tyler Brown overs, man. You can pick any of those numbers. I think that they're good value.
Put them all together, bundle them all up, all the overs.
Prize Picks not going to let you do that for those who are new. And if you are new to Prize Picks, you can use promo code Campus2Canton for $100 match on your first bet. But yeah, I think that's it for me. I think there's a lot of value in those 3 plays, though.
All right. JJ, who do you got this week? What are some of your favorite Prize Picks plays? I see some familiar names on here.
Yeah, I think I've bet Adunze every single week this year, and it has hit every single week this year. He's averaging Yeah, he's averaging 120 yards per game, and his low on the season is 107. And so I got over 103 this week, 103 and a half. He's just a wagon, so hop on. And then Malik Neighbors, my trademark. I'm getting that trademark for Love Thy Neighbors as soon as possible. I think he's finding his groove with Jaden Daniels, and I think he's on a hot streak. So I think what is his over? I forgot. It's 93 and a half. I think that's easily doable for him. And then I've got Katron Allen over 63 and a half. I think that this game should get out of hand pretty early. And I think that Nick Singleton will kind of take a step back. And Katron's kind of been out touching him too. He was in the blowout games, he was 19 versus 12 touches versus Delaware, and then 13 for 11 against Illinois. And then I think last week versus Iowa, it was 27 or 21 carries to 17. So I think Katron Allen's a good play at 63 and a half rushing yards.
All right. I like all the Penn State plays this week. I think that they're no homerism aside, I think that they're going to handle Northwestern pretty good. I also have a Penn State running back here in this one. I have Nick Singleton more than 16 fantasy points. He's had double-digit carries in every game, and I think the deciding factor here for me is the 5 touchdowns that Singleton has this week. Northwestern has given up 244 and 268 rush yards the last 2 weeks. It's a pretty soft defense on the ground, and I think Nick Singleton can break a long run, can get into the end zone. So I like Singleton over 16 fantasy points, but I do like Katron Allen over 63 and a half rush yards as well. Another Penn State play that I'd like that I got asked about in the Discord, in our Campus to Canton Discord, Drew Aller more than 15 and a half rush yards. I would play that one too. He's got that in 3 straight games. And Northwestern, again, like I said, soft on the ground. So I like over 15 and a half rush yards there. But my lock of the week, my favorite play, JJ, you're going to like this one. Jalen Milroe, more than 41 and a half rush yards. He's hit that in 2 of 3 games that he has played in this year. And Mississippi State has allowed every quarterback they've played this year, except for Southeastern Louisiana, to go over that 41 and a half number. And that includes Jaden DeLara, who's not really a running quarterback here. So they are susceptible on the ground. And I think this Alabama offense is starting to find its groove a little bit now that they're settled into Milroe. I think Milroe's going to have a big game in this one. Is go over that 41 and a half rush yards. All right, we did also get a little bit of breaking news here. Zachariah Branch is not dressed. The USC freshman wide receiver phenom. Nick, you talked about Taj Washington being a play this week. We talked about Brendan Rice being a potential play this week here. With Zachariah Branch out, do you expect Washington and Rice and maybe even Singer to see an uptick in targets here?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, one fewer really good player to compete with for those targets. Absolutely. I feel better, more confident in Rice, who we discussed at length earlier, with Branch out for sure. So yeah, I think those USC receivers definitely feel a little better about it. And on the Colorado side, Max Williams, starting safety for USC, is also out. So little bit of potential, good news for Shedeur Sanders and Xavier Wheeler and that Colorado offense.
All right. And we have a popular theory over at Campus to Canton called the Year 1-0 theory that highlights freshman wide receivers, some low minimum thresholds that wide receivers need to hit. Zachariah Branch has already hit his. We have another freshman wide receiver stud on USC. Deuce Robinson has also hit his as well. Mekhi Lemon. Chris, do you think this is an opportunity where Mekhi Lemon starts to make some headway? Is he going to get some more snaps today, maybe?
You sure hope so if you're a Mekhi Lemon guy. And I think Mekhi Lemon's a good player. Played high school with Malachi Nelson, who is their freshman 5-star. Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think he's good. So I'd like to see him part of the rotation, but it's a really deep rotation.
It is a very deep rotation. They've been rotating guys all season long. All right. We have a Devy session coming up next here with our Devy lead, Corey Pereira.
What is going on, Campus2Canton family? Corey Pereira here from the Campus2Canton Devy team, and week 5 is here. We're about midway through the season here, and we've got some young guys we need to be looking at, and maybe even some older names that we got to keep an eye on. Let's go. I want to start off today by taking a look at Kentucky wide receiver Berrien Brown, who's probably not having the sophomore follow-up that a lot of people were hoping after that impressive freshman season last year. But if you take a look at the way Kentucky's using him this year, it's a lot different than the ways they were using him last year. He has an 8 out of 17 yards or more in 3 of 4 games this year. That's a mark he only surpassed twice all season last year. And after seeing 40% of his targets behind the line of scrimmage last year, he's only seeing 16% this season in that area, with 33% coming 20 plus yards down the field. I would actually take it as an encouraging sign that he's developing away from those manufactured touches, which was actually part of his profile that he got dinged for last year. I mean, for a guy who's a very raw athlete, taking steps towards becoming a traditional wide receiver is actually a step in the right direction. Last week, we saw the emergence of yet another freshman running back this season, this time over at Houston in running back Parker Jenkins, who was a little bit of a sleeper this offseason when you look at the profile with Houston's ambiguous backfield, and then taking a look at his athletic profile. The guy's 5'11", almost 200 pounds, has run a 10.800 meter yard dash, and according to our recruiting team, has a .98 speed percentile score, which gives him some lofty athletic comparisons to a guy like CJ Spiller on the athletic comparison tool on the Campus2Canton website. He took 20 carries for 105 yards and 3 touchdowns last week against Sam Houston, so have to take it with a grain of salt with the level of competition there. But even with Houston seeing a few members of its backfield returning to health over the past weekend, Jenkins remained atop the depth chart going into this week, so we'll get to see how he does against some tougher competition like the Texas Tech Raiders this week. Now, I want to take a look at the other side of the age spectrum here and take a look at a fourth-year running back who's actually making some noise this year in TCU running back Imani Bailey. Now, Bailey was a little bit of a sleeper last offseason with his transfer up from Louisiana. People thought he could have a pretty big part of the backfield, but unfortunately, we saw the emergence of Kendre Miller in TCU's backfield last year, which kind of relegated him into a complementary role. Now, this year, Imani Bailey's taken that role, and he started the season on fire. Entering week 5, he's the sneaky second leader in the Power 5 for rushing yards. He's first in missed tackles forced, and he's first in 10-plus yard runs, so he's hitting those explosive plays. He's handling the new volume that he's getting, and at 5'9", 207 pounds, this is the kind of guy that could find his way into the NFL, perhaps a Senior Bowl candidate, but someone that we should probably be keeping an eye on. Now, one of the best matchups of this weekend is probably LSU going up against Ole Miss, where a few of our Devy favorites are going to be going head-to-head. One of those Devy favorites on the Ole Miss side is sophomore running back Quinshad Judkins, who, like a lot of the running backs in our top tier this year, have not really started out the year like we had hoped. He's only averaging 3.5 yards per carry against the likes of Tulane, Mercer, and Georgia Tech. He had a little bit of a better game against Alabama last year, but there's some reason here to be a little bit concerned. He's forcing missed tackles at a lower rate. He's having less explosive runs. I mean, in any metric you look at, Judkins has taken a step back early in this season. For a guy who forced a lot of missed tackles last year as well, there's times that I find he can dance a little too much or move a little bit too laterally when I think he's best suited as a guy who just needs to get downhill quickly. I haven't moved him much in my rankings to this point, but I'm definitely feeling less confident at this point of the season. Now, taking a look at the LSU side, I want to take a look at this wide receiver core, and I don't want to talk about Malik Neighbors. I want to talk about the third-year wide receiver who's breaking out a little bit in Brian Thomas Jr. Now, this was a guy who actually broke multiple year 1-0 thresholds in his freshman season, but wasn't really able to follow it up in his sophomore year. This year, he's already had more yards through 3 games than he's had in any season of his collegiate career, and he's showing a level of explosiveness that he hadn't previously shown, with almost 10% of his plays going for 35-plus yards and the highest yak per reception of his career. As a true junior, he's building a case to earn Day 2 draft capital if he can continue his play through the tougher part of his conference schedule. Speaking of potential Day 2 wide receivers, there's a few wide receivers who are making a strong push later into their careers this year and creating some really polarizing prospect profiles. I'm talking about guys like South Carolina's wide receiver Xavier Leggett, Michigan wide receiver Roman Wilson, Louisville wide receiver Jamari Thrash, and Colorado State wide receiver Torrey Horton. All four of these guys have the type of analytical profile that probably tells you to fade them and not really invest in them, but each of them brings a unique skill set to the table and really has a chance to make a strong push throughout the rest of the season. That's going to wrap it up for this week's Devy Sesh, guys. Make sure you guys are checking out the Back to Devy podcast every Wednesday morning, the #1 Devy podcast on the Campus to Canton Devy feed. Don't let anybody else tell you different, and make sure you guys are keeping it locked with Campus to Canton all season long.
All right. Thank you, Corey, for highlighting some under the radar wide receivers that we might see creep into the draft. We got some injury news for you here before we head into the break. We've already highlighted a couple. Xavier Weaver, wide receiver for Colorado, is likely to play today. Ramel Keaton, wide receiver for Tennessee, running back for Tennessee, Jalen Wright, both expected to play today. But more importantly, Caden Mays is expected back on the offensive line for Tennessee. That could have a big impact. Antonio Williams, wide receiver for Clemson, is out in this one. Nick, what are some late breaking news here? Or anything that I've missed so far?
Well, on the defensive side of the ball, which could impact your matchups a little bit, we just said that Max Williams is also going to be out for USC, starting safety for the Trojans, and at Clemson, Nate Wiggins is going to be out today, maybe their top corner. So going up against Syracuse, which is, of course, undermanned on the receiving core, but Garrett Schrader off to a strong start this year. And one potential follow-up to the Darius Taylor news, Sean Tyler has also been banged up, so it is looking like for Minnesota, Bryce Williams is going to be the guy at running back this week. Could be in line for a pretty large number of carries with Taylor out and with Tyler. If he's not specifically out, at least limited, it sounds like.
All right. And we did get some other news here. Raheem Sanders, the running back for Arkansas, is expected to finally make his return here today. This is a guy that we're pretty high on over at Campus to Canton. We have him ranked inside our top 5 running backs, I'm pretty sure across the board. So we're very high on him, very excited to see him back. Henrik Harburg, the quarterback for Nebraska, is also expected to start again. Jeff Sims has been banged up and just frankly was not that good to open the year. Chris, do you have any late breaking news here on the injury front?
Yeah, it looks like Rice quarterback JT Daniels is going to play, which I think is really good news for that offense. 3-point favorites against ECU at home. I think you can feel more confident backing Rice and playing Luke McCaffrey at wide receiver for sure.
All right. Luke McCaffrey, younger brother of San Francisco 49er Christian McCaffrey. We have a caller calling in here. Actually, is this the first call that we've gotten on the show here? Am I?
No, we had a self-described handsome black man from when that called in recently.
Okay, so first real caller in here. All right, we got Justin on the line. Justin,
hey guys. Hey, you just made the comment that Zachary Franklin's not going to be playing today. I have Rice for USC, but I currently have in Eric McAllister for Boise playing Memphis. Which way would you go there?
That's a great question, Justin. Thank you for calling in here. Nick, do you have a lean either way on Rice versus Eric McAllister, wide receiver for Boise? I know our rankings have tended to lean towards Rice so far.
Yeah, and even though my personal projections, CFB winning edge projections, don't always line up with the Campus to Canton rankings, I have been really, really impressed, especially in recent weeks where there have been some maybe surprising names that jump up the C2C rankings somewhat unexpectedly. Rice is one of those this week. Hate to be without Zachariah Branch, but that does, I think, make me a little more confident that Rice is going to be able to have a good day today. Colorado is really depleted in the secondary as well, with Travis Hunter out, with Shiloh Sanders out, A couple of other guys are out for them. So I think my position has strengthened on Rice throughout the last hour and a half, where I feel pretty confident in him now.
All right, JJ, you kind of in agreement here? Are you leaning Rice?
Yeah, I like Rice. Actually, I don't like Rice as a player that much, but I like Rice.
I like Rice the food.
Me too. But I think USC should score a lot of points, so that's always good to bet on.
Yeah, and he is coming off of that big game last week. Like I said, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think there's a good chance Rice gets in the end zone. I would also go with Rice here as well. Chris, are we making this a clean sweep?
Clean sweep, baby.
All right, clean sweep. Brendan Rice, thank you again for calling in, Justin. We are all leaning Brendan Rice. All right, have we had any other late-breaking injury news here? If otherwise, we're going to head to the break and hit some bets after this.
It's college football game day, and we're getting you ready for all the action on Campus to Canton.
I like to eat my feelings. So when I'm like super sad, single serving pint sizes of Ben and Jerry's, I just start shoveling that in, and it makes me feel bigger and better. But so let's eat our feelings here. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna talk football players, food. We're gonna pair them up. Who is represented by what food? All right. I want to just shout out Hal Alexander in there for CMC. Christian McCaffrey is Rocky Road ice cream. A little bit of everything.
Yeah,
does it?
Going out.
I like it, man. You know it. I love me some Rocky Road ice cream. Bijan Robinson prime rib. You know what? Bijan Robinson prime rib with a baked potato and some cream spinach on the side. That's what I'm talking about. That is the King's dinner. And Bijan Robinson, I don't care if the dude from The Athletic says only 301, touches. You know what? In honor of Card Sharks, I'm going to say, guys, that I think that number is going to be a little bit higher there for Bijan Robinson. So get your knife, get your fork, you got your steak, you got your Bijan.
Yeah, that's what's up. You're on death row, and they say you get one last meal, and you just say Bijan Robinson.
Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I'm totally down with that. Love it.
I got to jump in on one real quick because Mr. Scamper said Kareem Hunt is candy corn, and I actually had a player, Tyler Boyd, was going to be candy corn for me, and basically it's that nobody likes it, but it's always there. It's always there, and somebody always puts their hand in and grabs some and has some, and they're like, well, and afterwards they're like, why did I eat that? That's Tyler Boyd. He always gets drafted, and he's just kind of there, and nobody knows why. Nobody knows why they take him. Nobody knows where it comes from. Where does the candy corn even come from? Like, it's just there. It's just there.
We are back from break here. We have some best bets for you. Then we'll hit some game selections. We have Nick's picks and Moxley's money makers. Nick, what are some of your favorite bets here this week?
Trying to switch things up a little bit, took a small step in the right direction last week after a couple of rough ones. So Chris has definitely been carrying the two of us so far this season. But one of the things that I like to look at in my projections, they lean pretty heavily to underdogs most weeks, which I don't hate, in the grand scheme. But I do pay very close attention when all three of our projections, the team strength numbers, the talent only numbers, and the stats only numbers, when they all line up on a favorite, traditionally that's been a pretty good spot for our projections. Now this one has not moved in my direction, so perhaps you should operate with some caution. But Kentucky today, a 1.5 point favorite when I released it earlier in the week on Tuesdays when we publish our projections in the Campus2Canton Discord, the C2C Winning Edge channel. It was 2.5, but I've got Kentucky as right around a touchdown favorite in almost all three projections. So see some value there on the Wildcats at home. Marshall at 14.5. This one did move towards us. It was 13.5 on Tuesday. They're 14.5 point favorite over Old Dominion. All three projection models have it between 17 and 18. Memphis -2.5. This one made me scratch my head just a little bit. I'm not used to underrating Boise State, and our numbers traditionally have not always been super high on Memphis, but the three projection models all line up on Memphis to cover by a field goal or more.
Would you still play it at 3, Nick?
Is it 3 now?
Looks like it moved to 3 this morning.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. So let's see the projections specifically.
You're basically at a high risk for a push, right?
What's that?
You're basically just at a higher risk for a push.
Right. Yeah. So it doesn't really change anything. I mean, my numbers are honestly probably too high on Memphis. They're a double-digit favorite in the team strength model and the talent edge model, and right around a touchdown in the Prism model. So usually when I see a big projection outside of that 3-point to 7-point sort of sweet spot, I think Bill Connolly has sort of termed it there. That makes me worried a little bit that there's something I'm not accounting for or want to dig a little deeper on. But the reason I do the three models is it gives, three or two extreme takes or views on a game. And then the team strength incorporates those two and everything else. So I don't know. I feel like maybe there's just some, people might be valuing the Boise State brand a little more when our projections, don't factor that in at all. So that one's a little bit of a head scratcher, but I am on Memphis and would feel, to answer your question, try to get to the point, by 3. Yeah, feel okay about that one. Oklahoma, this one also made me a little bit nervous. It was 19.5 in the Vegas Insider consensus earlier this week, which is what I normally use. I see it right now anywhere between 18.5 and 20 against Iowa State, but it's very rare for our projections to be on such a big favorite, almost a 3 touchdown favorite in a conference game. And this Oklahoma team has been legitimately one of the best teams in the country in our team performance numbers so far this year. They've just played really, really well. And Iowa State, pardon me, is I think a pretty good spot for Oklahoma to put up a big number. One that I threw in the sheet and then I mentioned it on the Campus2Canton Discord, which we've lost pretty good chunk of value on it since. So do make sure you're with us in the Discord. But if this week doesn't go well on the FBS numbers, I'm just going strictly Ivy League from here on out. So I did mention Brown -10.5 against Central Connecticut State today. That number is now up to, looks like, between 12.5 and 14.5. So hopefully you were there in the Discord. But this Brown team, much improved. Not the worst team in the Ivy League as they were, by the media as they were selected earlier this season. And maybe the most prolific offense in the Ivy League. So I don't hate the over 52.5 was what it was earlier. I'm not sure what it is right now, but don't hate that either. But yeah, Brown, if you'll let me count -10.5, I feel less good at 14.5, but think Brown's in line for a pretty good day today.
I like them in 12.5. They got a quarterback that can play. I watched them against Harvard last week. I actually bet Harvard and was really impressed by that Brown team.
Yeah, Jake Wilcox, the quarterback, and he just left my name, but a really prolific receiver this year, Wes Rocket, 17 catches, 272 yards, and 2 touchdowns in 2 games.
Yeah,
what a name too! All name team.
Yeah, great name.
Rocket. Gotta love it. All right, Chris, we got some money makers from you. What do we got on this one?
Last week wasn't my best week, but I would like to point out, and I put this out every week, that we are now every week we give, or I at least give an FBS versus FCS matchup. So, the FCS is teams like Auburn Christian, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, etc. We've been killing those. I got one. Gonna give it last. I had a whole bunch of different ones on the sheet this morning, and they all moved. So I've had to readjust a little bit. Give me Akron -3 versus Buffalo. DJ Irons is going to play. He's healthy. I really don't like this Buffalo team. I think Akron's been a little bit more competitive. They had a really strong showing last week against a good Indiana defense. I thought that was a really spirited performance from the Zips, and a bad performance from Indiana. But still, that's a big mismatch. And to play that well, it was pretty impressive. And I think that you're getting a field goal. The numbers are the sharpest they are, 20 minutes before kickoff. I don't mind that. I actually even played an Akron alt line. I think I played -5 at +125. I think that's a pretty interesting way to play that game. If you're a little worried about the 3, go up to 6. Yeah, I mean, I think you go up to 6.5 and get probably +145 or +155 or something.
Nick McMillan is out, by the way, for Buffalo today.
Okay, so that passing offense is going to be questionable, despite I think their quarterback's quite good. But if they don't have weapons, you can only do so much. I'm backing Rice with the news that JT Daniels is going to play. They're at home. Really question this ECU team. I know that they won against Gardner-Webb last week. I don't think much of Gardner-Webb, and that was a weird game with the lightning delay and everything. So I just think Rice is a much better team, especially on defense, than this ECU team is. And they really just don't have an offensive identity for the Pirates. So give me Rice at 3. And then my FBS versus FCS game, it opened at 17, 30 minutes ago. And I got 17 and put it again, Campus2Canton Discord. It's moved to 16. I project this game to be closer to 13.5, 14. But give me Abilene Christian to cover that 16 versus North Texas. I don't believe these teams are 3 scores apart. I really don't. I think they're much closer than that. And I think Abilene Christian is a pretty good FCS school. So, I like this North Texas offense. I do. But I don't think that their defense is going to be able to slow this team down too much. So you give me 3 scores, I'm going to take Abilene Christian in this one. I think 16's at DraftKings currently. There might be other 16s. I haven't seen anything it opened 17.5. I got it 17. But I just 3 scores a little too much.
All right, we got the famous FCS versus FBS line from Chris there. We also had somebody in the chat mention that they have Arkansas money line +200. JJ, you seem to be a fan of that one. Are you liking that Arkansas money line?
I think it's got a good chance to hit. I personally am probably. I put my free play on Arkansas +200 just because it's a good bet. But if Max Johnson can play well, I think they should edge him out. But I do like KJ Jefferson, so I'm not opposed. And I did.
There we go. All right, we welcome in Barnabas Lee now for our game selections. He's our NFL draft analyst at PKJB Lee on Twitter. Barnabas, welcome in.
Hi, how's everyone doing?
We're doing good here. We're ready for some game selections. And then we're going to come to Barnabas to highlight some of these players that we're watching in these matchups. First up is the big noon kickoff. We got number 8 USC. 22-point favorites. That line has shifted slightly this morning, going up against Colorado. Nick, who do you got here in this one? Who do your numbers like?
By a very, very small margin. I've got Colorado to cover. I do have USC in the team strength model as more than a 21-point favorite, but just shy of that 22. The stats only model, which doesn't take into account any of our roster strength or recruiting talent numbers. That one has USC as being favored by 24, but officially I'm on Colorado by just enough to cover.
Okay, Chris, what are your numbers like here in this one?
I have USC is at 27.5, which is actually where it opened. came back down. If you want to play this game, like from a betting perspective, under 74 is out there right now, and I think that's the sharp move. But I have USC to cover.
Okay, under 74 game total is
Yes.
the sharp move here. All right, JJ, who do you got here in this one?
You know, I put on my shades last week, and that didn't work out so well. But I can't not root for Prime, but I do think USC is going to pull away with this one. So
I agree. I think USC is just going to be too much for that defense of Colorado to handle. We saw it last week against a similarly high-powered Oregon offense. So I am also going with USC, but Barnabas, from a draft perspective, who do we have our eyes on here? Maybe outside of these quarterbacks.
Yeah, so I think it was Peter Thamel that tweeted like an hour or so ago that there are 21 teams represented amongst NFL draft scouts at this USC Colorado game, which obviously it's not only to confirm the eye test on Caleb Williams. Obviously, people want to see shooters. So let's talk about the trenches. You know, I love talking about those big boys. And let's talk about two transfers here. Jarrett Kingston played left tackle for Washington State last year. He's transferred in. He's playing right guard, I believe, for USC. And then Fresno State transfer Leonard Payne is playing defensive tackle for Colorado. You know, if Colorado's defense is going to do anything, it has to at least stop the run, right? USC isn't a super Lincoln Riley is a more run heavy coach than people give him credit for. And so let's see if Payne can make a difference. You know, he's a bigger guy. He's not a huge pass rush guy. But let's see if they can stop the run.
All right. So we've got some guys to keep an eye on outside of those obvious big quarterbacks. We'll move into our next matchup here. Number 1, Georgia, 14-point favorites versus Auburn. Georgia famously, they've been talking all week, is one of the 2 undefeated teams to not cover a single game this year. Nick, who do you got in this one?
I've got Georgia to win, but Auburn to cover. It's somewhat similar to the projections for USC Colorado. The stats only model is much higher on Georgia. Have Georgia favored by 15 in that one, but the official model, the team strength model, is closer to 11. So feel like, you know, we haven't seen the best of Georgia yet. I'm skeptical that this is the week where they finally break out. So I wouldn't be shocked if, you know, first road game of the season, tough environment, maybe Georgia, you know, starts a little slow again. This game is a 1-score game in the second half. Georgia, you know, maybe pulls away and wins by 10 or so. But yeah, at least the way my numbers see it, Auburn should be able to keep it close enough.
All right, Chris, who do you got here in this one?
I have to go with Georgia. You know, my numbers actually make it like 13, and I'd really like to back Auburn. But there's going to be a get right point for this Dogs team, and I think it might be this week. You know, this is a rivalry game, and I think Georgia and Kirby Smart's going to say, "Hey, it's time to get your stuff together, pals. We gotta play championship football." And I'm afraid it might be this week.
All right, JJ, who do you got here on this one?
I got Georgia, but I'm not big on Georgia this year. I think they suck, but Auburn sucks way more. And is Lad McConkey playing this week?
I don't
questionable coming in, but I believe. Well, there are 3:30 games, so we won't hear for a second. But he was questionable coming in. I think reports are saying he's probably going to play.
I did see Campus2Canton say, or they had the YouTube thumbnail that said best receiver in the country. So maybe if he plays, maybe that'll help them a little bit.
All right. And producer Will, we are coming to you here. Who do you have in this one?
We don't need the 14.5. What can we get for Auburn money line?
There we go. Auburn money line. All right. And then we had Mike Dorn in the chat said he placed bets on all of our spread plays today. So best of luck to you, Mike. I, in this matchup, Georgia, Auburn. I have Auburn. Like I said, Georgia and Michigan so far, the two undefeated teams that have yet to cover a spread. And this Georgia offense is just still banged up. I think Auburn's going to be able to hang with them just enough to keep it close. But Barnabas, we talked a little bit about some of these pass catchers, some of these offenses. Who are you keeping an eye on here in this Georgia-Auburn game?
Yeah, if Georgia's going to crush Auburn, it's going to have to be in a rush situation with banged up running backs, or they're going to have to air it out with, questionable weapons other than Brock Bowers, who was the only proven asset here, right? And so Ladd McConkey is questionable coming in. But Auburn has had a surprisingly good secondary this year. They've been playing better than expected, which is I guess not saying much because they had a low bar to begin with. But, Nehemiah Pritchard is getting back into gear after suffering an injury early in the season. And he was replaced by a freshman, Kayan Lee, who played better than expected as well. Keontae Scott is out indefinitely, but DJ James is in there. And Jalen Simpson is probably going to be the one covering Brock Bowers all night. He's on the bigger side for a safety, but that's not saying much, obviously, at 6'1", 200-ish. And so that'll be the matchup that I'm watching. But, we'll see where the points come from for Georgia, right?
Yeah, that's my concern here as well. The Auburn money line, is that plus 500? Is that what you were saying, Chris, in the chat?
You can get it plus 500 at Bet Rivers right now.
There it is. That's tempting. That one's tempting. We know Will's on that one. All right. We have the Battle of the Unbeatens in the Big 12 coming up with Kansas, number 24, at plus 16, going into number 3, Texas, the 3:30 game here. Nick, who do you got in this one?
I am again on Kansas to cover. I sound like a broken record, but the way the projections shake out on this one, the stats only model likes Texas a bit more, but the official model sees definitely some value still on Kansas. One thing that just caught my eye as I was looking at our FBS team profiles, which gives all the projected point spreads for all the models for every game for the rest of the year. I've got Kansas favored in every game outside of this week against Texas and then against Oklahoma on October 28th. So a little bit of a surprise there, but yeah, numbers are pretty high on Kansas and think they're going to be able to keep this one close, keep it within 2 scores. All
right, Chris, who do you got here in this one?
So I played Kansas plus 18.5 on FanDuel when it opened, which little trick for everyone that likes to play some bets on Sunday. FanDuel opens before anybody else, and their numbers are usually 3 or 4 points off market on totals and sides. So they opened 18.5, snatched that right up. But now it's down to between 15 and 16. I know in the sheet I have Texas, but in my heart I have Kansas, so I'm going with Kansas.
Ooh, gut call.
I make the game 15. So toss up, but I'm go Jayhawks, baby.
All right, Rock Chalk. All right, who do you have in this one?
Mid-show, I just placed a Kansas money line plus 550. Oof. So I think Quinn is fraudulent. I've said Cade is fraudulent. Quinn is also fraudulent, and the whole Texas team is fraudulent as well.
Dogs are barking this morning.
We got a lot of love for the dogs here. I'm going to go on the favorite. I'm going to take the favorite side of this one. Texas has, looked good when they've needed to. They played up to competition. They played down to competition. I think they get up for this one. The 40 Acres faithful will be. We'll take this one. Barnabas, who do we got? Who are we keeping an eye on here in this matchup?
Yeah, I'm going back to the trenches here. The Kansas interior offensive line, the law firm of Pooney, Ford, and Nowitzki. They're facing off against a stout defensive front from Texas, who, by the way, just got 2 defensive tackles drafted in this past year. They now have 2 more fifth-year guys and a junior in Alfred Collins, Byron Murphy, T'Vondre Sweat. Can we maybe talk about at some point where Byron might be the most drafted name in the NFL in the past couple of years. Anyway, that's a side note. But we talked about Devin Neal earlier in the show. If he's going to have any sort of success, these Pooney, Ford, and Nowitzki are going to have to get some push on these guys. And every single team that Texas has faced so far has been struggling with that defensive front. So we'll see how that goes.
And as Nick pointed, the dogs are literally barking. All right, we have the next matchup here. Exciting game. LSU, number 13, 2.5-point favorites, going up against number 20, Ole Miss. Nick, who do you got in this one?
This one, my confidence is at an all-time low. My numbers are probably too low on LSU, probably too high on Ole Miss. So with that in mind, I've got Ole Miss projected as a 4-point favorite. So Ole Miss winning this game outright, but zero confidence in that.
Chris, who we got?
LSU, and I am hammering LSU -2.5. They're winning this game. Ole Miss is fraudulent.
Okay. Accusations thrown around over here. Hammering this LSU line. JJ, are you in agreement? Who do you got on this one?
Yeah, I think I got LSU in every single. I got -2.5 in every single parlay. So hopefully Malik goes crazy. Love thy neighbors.
Hashtag love thy neighbors.
Sure.
Did you trademark that one yet? I know you were talking about it.
I'm going to. I need to.
We have a patent attorney in the chat.
We have at least an attorney in the chat. We may be able to help us out.
Sweet.
I am on that LSU line as well. I think that this is just a much better team than Ole Miss, despite them being ranked pretty closely together. So give me Ole Miss. But Barnabas, who are we keeping an eye on in this one from a draft perspective?
Yeah, we've talked about Michael Trigg is gone now, and this LSU defense is a lot softer than we're expecting from like the old days of like Honey Badger and Morris Claiborne and those guys. But Major Burns is probably going to get assigned Caden Prescorn, assuming he plays. He's listed as questionable right now coming into the game, and Jackson Dart probably doesn't have the arm strength to get really too much going. And Trey Harris is also expected to play, so expect a good number of targets soaked up there. But I'm interested to see whether Major Burns can be the next LSU DB and continue this like DBU brand that the Tigers have had going for a few years now.
All right, Major Burns. Last matchup we have here is a ranked v ranked matchup. Notre Dame. Number 11, coming off that loss to Ohio State last week. They're 5.5-point favorites at Duke, number 17 in the country. This is the late game, 7:30. Nick, who do we got on this one?
So I've got a not much value here at all. My projection is Notre Dame favored by 5.3. So right there with
right on the line.
The odds makers with the market. So technically on Duke to cover, I could see a couple of scenarios where, Riley Leonard hasn't necessarily played to that elite level so far this season, but, maybe this is the game where he truly does break out. Notre Dame is a little bit banged up at the receiver position. Duke has been a top 10 pass defense in our team performance numbers. So I do think this is a winnable game for Duke. I wouldn't be shocked if they find a way to win this one. So technically on Duke to cover, but Notre Dame favored, very much in line with what the market's got.
All right, Chris, who do you got here in this one?
Irish.
Sticking with the Irish. JJ, who we got? All right.
Notre Dame.
All right. I am also on the Irish here in this one. I think it's going to be another slugfest, though. And it's, Barnabas, you're highlighting some trench play here. Who are we watching on this one?
Yeah, so I wrote about Javonte Jean-Baptiste, the Ohio State transfer to Notre Dame in week 0, I believe. But J.D. Bertrand and Lufau, the linebackers, really shined in that matchup against Navy. But, since then, Jean-Baptiste has been going crazy out there, including a career-high tackles last week against his old school. He's going up against one of the top tackles in this draft class, minus the Penn State duo that are both going to go really high. But Graham Barton is getting a lot of buzz here, especially with how Riley Leonard is looking with his legs. That a lot of that has to do with the fact that Barton's handling his job. And someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think Jean-Baptiste was the one that was missing when Ohio State scored that touchdown, that 11th man that could have been. And so, we'll see how that Irish defense looks with 11 men on the field instead of 10.
There we go. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thanks so much, guys, for hopping in here. We got Barnabas at PKJB Lee, Nicholas E. and Allen at CFB Winning Edge, Chris Moxley at Chris Moxley 19, JJ Parker at J Parker 1738, and I was your host, Colin Decker at C2C Decker. We will be back with you guys next week.